The rock and roll lifestyle is a myth. Now, what do I mean by that? When you're a teenage kid and you see rock stars and you think, oh, wow, they've got this fancy car and they've got all this money and they've got all these women and they got all these party supplies, the booze, the drugs, all of those things. You think, oh man, they must be having so much fun. They've got everything a teenage boy could dream of. This was the lie that was perpetrated to my generation, the rock and roll lifestyle. Now, I remember a while back, there was a song, How Do You Afford Your Rock and Roll Lifestyle? Let me know in the comments who did that song, but I always thought that was an amusing song, because the reality is most of us will never be able to afford it. Buying a Lamborghini or even a Mustang or a Corvette is going to be really hard on a sideman's salary. Record companies barely exist now. And if you were to get a record deal, they're going to want a piece of your merchandise money, your t-shirt money, your hat money. But even when record companies ruled the roost and it was the brass ring for every musician to get a record deal, even then, they were going to rip you off. They were going to find a way to not have to pay you if that meant paying for your limousines and paying for your hotel rooms and getting you a nicer bus and all of these things that they would use and then skim a little off the top. So that at the end of the year, you'd finish your tour, you'd have a #1 album, and you'd still owe them $1 million. It happened to Van Halen. I don't think their album went #1, but we all know how many copies Van Halen 1 sold. And how that album was like a neutron bomb going off. And those guys went out there on that road and they blew legacy acts off the stage like Black Sabbath, Journey. They were young, they were hungry. And they were filled with the dream of the rock and roll lifestyle. And they lived it. And now, Eddie Van Halen, he's not here anymore. He didn't make it. And the ones that are left, now they're up on stage in clown outfits, trying to relive their past. It's a tough life. And most musicians will never get to that level. Even if you're lucky, you might make it to being a sideman, to being a hired gun for one of these acts. And if you're lucky enough to get one of those positions, you're going to make barely enough money to survive. That's the reality. So how do you afford your rock and roll lifestyle? It reminds me of the time, playing a gig somewhere and being in a restaurant, and the kid waiting on us thought all of us would pull up in our Porsches and our Lamborghinis and our Ferraris because we were on tour and, with a name artist. And we all laughed because we were driving Hondas and Toyotas and, cars with paint issues and dents in the side. And, you can go right now to the biggest lots of tour bus companies in Nashville. And, starting on, say, Thursday or a Wednesday, the parking lot starts to fill up with all the musicians that get on the buses and go work for these big name artists. And you'll see a few nice cars, and chances are those are driven by the artists themselves. But then you'll see the rest of the cars in the lot. There'll be beat up trucks and, small compact cars and, beaters and older cars, 10, 20 years old. You don't see a lot of Ferraris. You don't see a lot of Lamborghinis. You don't see Corvettes. You don't even see Mustangs. They're the cars of working class people. And that's all they'll ever achieve. And the legacy acts now, when they bring in, every now and then somebody will hit the lottery. We used to call it, in country music, we called it the redneck lottery. Because you'd know somebody who, showed up in town and happened to get on the right gig, and then all of a sudden the artist blows up, and the artist decides to take care of his band because he realizes without them, he needs them. He needs them to succeed. And some of these artists have had bands for a long time, and the bands are a huge part of their success. But I don't think any of those guys are millionaires. The artists probably are, but they still have to go out. You can be a millionaire and be cash poor. People said, oh, well, the Jane's Addiction guys, they don't have to be out there. They've got plenty of money. But man, everybody needs cash flow. Everybody has bills coming in, and they have to be paid. And they have mortgages. And maybe they have ex-wives that they have to pay. Why do they have ex-wives? Because they bought into the rock and roll mythos, the myth, the great lie. They get grief from their wife back home because they're always gone. And then there's a smiling face on the road and someone that's just, oh, you're so wonderful and you're so great. And they get tempted by that. They get tempted by somebody who's not sick of their you-know-what. And then pretty soon they're divorced, but they're making payments. And they're having to pay alimony and child support and all these different things. I heard long time ago, a band that had two brothers in it. One of my favorite bands, and I'm not going to name names. Because the reality is none of us really know someone's finances. But I've been told that the reason why this band would continue to tour and go out there is because this one musician had so many ex-wives that every time he got an ex-wife, he had to cut everything in half. And man, people don't understand, like when they say, okay, you're worth $10 million. So now you're going to have to give your ex-wife $5 million. The reality is you don't have $10 million cash that you can cut in half and, oh, here's your $5 million. I'm going to go over here with my $5 million. No, you're worth $10 million because you have that house, because you have a couple cars, because you maybe have a recording studio, maybe a couple investments, maybe some stocks, but you don't have $10 million cash. But you're still going to have to fork over that $5 million. So then you have to sell the mansion. And maybe it's a bad time in the market, so you take a loss. And then you've got to sell a few cars. And everybody knows you don't get anywhere near what you paid for a new car when you sell it. And then maybe you have to sell some stocks because, and maybe the timing's not good. Maybe it's not the best time to sell. And you've got to do all this liquidating to get that $5 million. And maybe when it's done, maybe when it's all said and done, maybe then you've only got $2 million left. So now what do you have to do? That $2 million still might be in assets. So now you've got to go back on the road over and over again. And then guess what happens? You marry again. And then the same thing happens. And you've got to cut it in half again. And you're getting older. And your songs aren't charting anymore. And you're not able to generate the amount of money. And maybe your bandmates still develop drug problems. So they're not doing good on the road. What then? What then, Will Robinson? Danger, danger. It's a dead-end path, man. It's a dead-end path. And it's being led by the rock and roll myth, the rock and roll lifestyle. Instead of just going out there and treating it like a job. Now, I get it, man. You're having trouble sleeping on the road. Here, drink this. You're tired before your show. Your body hurts. Here, take this. Need more energy? Here, take this. Oh, now you need to go to sleep? Here, take this. Even if you're not trying to party, you can succumb to the demands of your schedule. It's not just the shows. It's the radio appearances. It's the interviews. It's the band meetings. It's the lawyer phone calls. It's the promoter. It's the radio guy wanting you, hey, if you guys just do this, I'll help sell tickets to your show. And you get sucked into this merry-go-round. This insane merry-go-round that you can't get off because you need the money. So even if you're trying to do the right thing and you're not trying to party and you're not trying to, I don't want to live the rock and roll lifestyle. The lifestyle will live you. The lifestyle will live you, and you will have to live it to survive, to not lose your mind or your ability to keep going. And you can't just go out there and play one show and take 4 days off. It costs too much money to be out there with your gear and all your stuff. You just can't do that. So they're going to put as many shows as they can. And you see these older acts and they do a show and they take a night off. Man, that is expensive because just because the crew has the night off doesn't mean you can't pay them nothing. They have to be paid at least per diem. And most of them are going to want a weekly fee. They're not going to want, if you can't do, 5 shows in a row, they're still going to want to get paid. They're not going to want to be out there sitting around not making any money because it costs money to live. So they get you out on that merry-go-round and they spin you around and they spin you around. And pretty much you look around, pretty soon you look around and you're old and you can't perform anymore. But you still got to be out there paying the piper for the lifestyle that you led, for the path that you chose. And it gets harder and harder and harder. If you don't pull it together and realize the whole thing is one great big lie, and realize this is a job. I'm here to do a job. I've got to try to manage myself and manage my lifestyle so that I can continue to work. But now we see the results of that rock and roll lifestyle in the grave sites of the young who died way before they should have. And for those who didn't, who continue to travel down that trail, that rock and roll lifestyle path. And they're out there just embarrassing themselves.